Hey, welcome everyone. My name is Tristan Claridge. I'm the convener of this webinar series for the International Social Capital Association. The association's mission is to advance the research and application of the social capital concept, and the association is welcoming new members if you want to check it out. In this session, we welcome Dr. Sungdae Lim for a presentation titled The Non-Profit Role in Building Community Social Capital, a moderated mediation model of organizational learning, innovation, and shared mission for social capital creation. Sungdae Lim is an assistant professor of public administration in the Department of Political Science at Sam Houston University. He holds a PhD in public administration from Florida State University. Dr. Lim's research centers on public and nonprofit leadership, innovation, and co-production, with an emphasis on social equality, community engagement, and social construction in public service governance. I invited Sungdae to give this webinar after reading his recent paper with the same title. So welcome, Sungdae. Over to you for the presentation. It's great you could join us.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me, Tristan, and thank you all for being here and for your interest in my research. I think it's as I already said, it's a good afternoon here, but I guess for most of you, it's a very late evening or I guess early in the morning or something. So I really appreciate you being here, even if the time differences really work. So what a global context here, right? It's a great pleasure for me to be part of this important seminar, and I hope that my brief talk will be a little, meaningful addition to that. So as Tristan introduced, my name is Sungdae Lim. I'm an assistant professor at Sam Houston State University, which is in Texas in the United States. My research mostly centers on nonprofit management leadership, but in conjunction with promoting their community engagement roles. And this is how I started this community social capital research. But to be honest, before I get started, I'm not a long-term expert on this subject area. So I just hope you understand my short-term, background and expertise about that. But I'm still, working on that. So I really hope that we can share our, great insights between each other and then, add to each other or something. But I expect this nonprofit-based research and approach can be a little refresher or might be a good, meaningful source of your great insights into the social capital scholarship and practice. So please take this presentation as any type of a resource and sources of our insights as you wish. So starting with the paper, working with Dr. Byung-Yi Min at Wayne State University and Dr. David Bolan at Florida State University, we studied what internal managerial features of nonprofit organizations promote their community engagement for social capital creation, especially for community social capital. So the title of this paper is The Nonprofit Role in Building Community Social Capital, which is a modern mediation model. Basically, this research addressed the interactive dynamics between nonprofits' instrumental and expressive accountabilities, including their learning, innovation, and shared mission in terms of how their combination of all these three would promote their role in community social capital engagement, which resulted in the creation of that to the target and serving community. So let me go ahead and introduce how we have developed this conceptual framing and what we have found through our analysis, right? All right, so starting with a little bit of the background for this research, nonprofits do a lot of community engagement works. So they do provide social services to benefit not only their direct service users, but also the whole society for social benefits for the whole community as a whole. And in the process, they actively bring those interests in their work and get them actively engaged in the nonprofit social networks and services through their volunteering, funders for donations, direct service users, as co-producers too, and also by joining the boards and staff, which also leads to community building around the particular service provision with that engagement with that community members. So this community engagement of nonprofits is basically considered the most well-known positive external effect that nonprofits produce. And there's a lot of intangible community level common capital to be produced, including shared norms and values to promote and to be bound by, and a sense of community and a sense of belonging, and the utilization of resources to be created by bringing all the different and diverse profiles and the backgrounds of people and the community to the societal level problem solving. And all these share the benefits that are produced and retained for the community as a whole is what we call community social capital. So as you can see here, nonprofits, they do facilitate the creation of community social capital, while they also lead the community building dynamics through their particular service provision and their associational activities and social networks. And it is their important goal orientation. So when you see the literature on community social capital, especially published in the past 5 to 10 years from nonprofit management journals, such as NVSQ, NML, or Volunteers, or some book chapters, you will probably recognize the community social capital does not just randomly emerge, and they are not promoted equally among all different local communities. The substantial portion of that driving force for community social capital, it actually comes from the interactive dynamics of the nonprofits that differently perform by different organizations and different localities. So what it means is that out of many types of social capital, the creation of a local level community social capital largely depends on how the local-based nonprofits promote such community reservoirs of their shared resources through their own social service provision and association activities. And as informed and introduced in my paper, the justification of nonprofit activities is much founded on their social causes and unmet services decided to provide in regard to community building. So they pursue community engagement goals such as promoting values, trust, shared norms by providing social causes and networking benefits for that community. So whatever they do as a nonprofit organization, if that is not related to the community context or community building domain, then what's the point of their activity, right? So we do have nonprofit organizations in addition to business sector or government organizations in order to provide actually pretty much the same services. So why do we need the nonprofits? And our key and our answer to that question is always about the community engagement activities of the nonprofits. So they do make that connections between what they do from their managerial operation and daily operations to the benefits and resources that are benefited to the community as a whole, right? So this community orientation of nonprofits is not just about the nonprofits giving those things and the benefits to the community, right? It's not about the unilateral relationship, but it is also paid back to them depending on how they do well for such goal achievement in terms of community engagement. So these reciprocal partnerships between the nonprofits and the localities and the local communities is the key to growing the nonprofits in both operational and expressive accountabilities, right? So depending on their community engagement that facilitates community social capital, they also receive community trust and support back to them. And it's not just about the intangible expressive outcomes not being materialized, but they also are actually the tangible and substantive outcomes and chances to get them, have more, advantages and edges in the service market, right? So contributing to the creation of community social capital is one of the most important performance indicators for nonprofits. And this is why we need to study how nonprofits can effectively combine their instrument and expressive competencies in order to better promote their community social capital creation role, right? And the recent nonprofit management literature shows a strong tendency to adopt social entrepreneurial approaches as the key to sustaining nonprofit performance, including the community engagement domain. So they especially stress the importance of organizational learning and innovation as a combined way to learn and adopt other successful business practices that are applied and implemented in their nonprofit management particularly. So the majority of theory and evidence about organizational learning, innovation, and their roles is actually heavily drawn from the management literature and their field. So when we see that, so what they say is basically that it has been consistently found that learning and innovation promote organization performance, and it's been very long and consistent and strong findings about their positive effects on organization performance in various dimensions. So for learning, although there are some variations in definitions and dimensions, you can see one widely used definition here as the process by which the firm develops new knowledge and insights from the common experiences of people in that organization. So this is about taking new knowledge and information from external sources in terms of up-to-date successful strategy models, and then they do take those things into their organizational distribution and application processes for making sure to have their overall organization members share and understand each other. So the theoretical literature suggests 4 subdimensions of the organizational learning processes, which is knowledge acquisition, knowledge distribution, knowledge interpretation, and organizational memory. So it is basically the cyclical processes of organizational learning. So you first acquire the knowledge, new knowledge, and then map those into your organization, and then you try to make sure that those things, the new knowledge and themes, are distributed to the organization members, and you also make sure to have the overall and common interpretation about the new themes. And then you get them stored into the organizational memory as the intellectual capacity for the organization to be used for further and following situations, right? Well, it is consistently found to have a direct effect on both innovation and performance. So learning organizations, they show that they take information and knowledge about external successful business models, and then they distribute them and form a common set of interpretation about how to apply these new practices into their organizations. And finally, they actually do that as an innovation. Okay? And this is how learning works for getting more chances to engage in ongoing innovative processes, as well as better outcomes to be made through the innovative processes. So when those innovations succeed, then you benefit from that better outcome sets, right? And for innovation, one way to capture the dimensionality is basically to see that as implementing new products or services, new processes, and marketing those new products and services, and establish new internal management systems, right? So it has been found to have a strong direct effect on performance for the organization, definitely. But this relationship also extends toward the mediating role between learning and performance, because the learning processes for new knowledge and successful models, they become the driving force for adopting new things as innovation, right? So the learning innovation relationship, they creates the competitive advantages for the organization as the dimension of performance. And the mediation model, as you can see here, it also applies to the nonprofit context. So many nonprofit management studies, they do stress both learning and innovation in the context of adopting, distributing, implementing new entrepreneurial models for their social service provision. So applying to nonprofits, so learning and innovation, and then the mediation dynamics about learning, innovation, and performance relationships, they also apply to the nonprofit context. And basically, the theoretical basis of this application to the nonprofit context is social entrepreneurship movement. So it has strengthened that link between learning and innovation as a means of improving both instrument and express accountabilities. So when you adopt these learning and innovation practices in the nonprofit context, and it has been consistently found that they actually do promote both instrumental and expressive dimensions of nonprofit performance, including their community engagement roles. So given that literature, we suggest here that the mediating effect of innovation applies to nonprofits in between learning and the social capital creation role. But despite the consistent findings showing how learning and innovation work in nonprofits from the social entrepreneurship context, we also noted that this instrumental-only orientation of learning and innovation and applying those practices from the business sector, they can distort nonprofits' express activities and outcomes. And this can also lead to serious gaps and mismatches between the nonprofit's primary strategies and management and their ultimate mission orientation and achievement. So applying those new strategy changes and methods and business practices is not always, and has been found that they are not always instrumental to enhancing their expressive dimension of nonprofit performance, especially for community engagement. So even with that social entrepreneurship context for social capital creation of nonprofits, it is also important to clarify how such managerial learning and innovation practices become that sources and become focused on the community building domain for community social capital creation. So we focused on the importance of mission fulfillment here, which is shared by the organization members, and which also underlies their daily operation and decisions. So the nonprofit mission here sets the organization's end goal to serve its particular social causes and values, and it is realized through the nonprofit's community engagement, which is oriented toward their mission, right? So nonprofit missions, but they are not static. They ever change either explicitly and implicitly. So even if you have the mission statement pretty much stable for years or something, but the meaning and interpretations of their mission actually changes along the time, along with the different and changing profiles of the engaged people, along the changing social context, values, and priorities of different values and social causes, right? So managing shared mission conceptions is very important and critical, but it's not really easy, right? And especially in terms of mobilizing the entire organization activities and resources based on that shared conceptions and interpretation of the mission. So we test here whether the shared mission, whether when we achieve that certain level of the shared mission for a nonprofit organization, whether that aligns the managerial efforts to the mission supporting practice, getting that alignment between these two different dual accountability dimensions, which in turn mobilizes the nonprofit's innovative capacity for promoting community social capital and having that process is a cyclical and getting that synergy effects on an ongoing basis. Okay. So our research question is here, a long way to get here. So we asked, does shared mission of a nonprofit guide its learning and innovation impacts to better work for social capital creation? And we propose a considered framing here that nonprofits animating their learning and innovation practices instilled with that shared mission orientation would well perform their role in promoting community social capital. Right? So this is our conceptual framework for that model. As you can see in this figure, we developed a first stage modeling model. So in addition to the mediation model of organizational learning, innovation, and social capital creation, and we also try to test whether the addition of shared mission in that relationship between learning and innovation at the first stage would also strengthen these positive mediation model. And there are controls at the bottom. We do have two size variables, employment size and asset size, and also we control for the industry types of nonprofits. So here are our hypotheses. So hypothesis 1 through 3 are about the direct and indirect effects of learning and innovation on social capital creation. And hypothesis 4 is about the moderating effect of shared mission of nonprofits. Okay. All right, so for data, so we've got the combined data set of our 2018 national survey, which was administered to executive directors and CEOs of nonprofits, and also the organizational features and characteristics collected from the National Center for Charitable Statistics in 2018. So we've combined these two sets of data sources into one common data set, and we use this data for our research and analysis. For sampling, so how we started with this was basically we started with the full list of of all 501c3 public charities in the nonprofits. So for legal categorization, you have public charities as the representative of nonprofit organizations, and every year the government and the Center for Charitable Statistics, they update the number and the list of population organizations for this categorization based on the IRS information, which is tax collection agency of the federal government. And there was initially more than 420,000 organizations and the population data, but we have also put a set of cutoff criteria. So we wanted to make sure that the subject organizations that we test has at least a little, minimum level of managerial capacities and competencies. So for asset sizes and their compensation sort of level was that set of cutoff criteria. And then we've got the study population size of 78,180 nonprofits meeting our cutoff criteria. And with that population, we've done a random sampling to 7,000, and we chose 7,890 organizations. And we've sent our survey invitation to these organizations and ended up 556 responses collected, but only 720 respondents as the CEOs and executive directors of their nonprofits, they agreed to use their responses for this research. So we stick to that subject organizations of 720. And then we combined their organizational characteristics from the NCCS data archives into this data set. Then we've done mean difference tests for major organizational characteristics in terms of assets, revenues, expenses, compensations, contribution sizes, and proven revenues they have earned in 2018. I think it was 2016 before. There was no mean difference, significant mean difference. We've got only except for compensations, but we do assume that this is attributed to the different portions of health and educational nonprofits, because basically there are many of which education institutions and hospitals categorized in nonprofits, but they don't actually identify themselves as nonprofits, but they are rather identify themselves as they are and categorized into their industry, not as really the broad nonprofit context or nonprofit categorization. So we think it is really a good reflection of the population nonprofit sort of sector in the United States. We assume that the sample overall represents the population characteristics, and we use this data for our analysis. And for measurement, the measures of the study variables are basically drawn from the previously developed and validated instruments. So starting with the outcome variable of social capital creation, we measured the nonprofit role in promoting community social capital by 3 items that are drawn from Moulton and Ackworth's research, and they're measured in terms of the social capital creation role for nonprofits. So this measurement is basically based on our conceptualization of social capital that focuses on the community building features through both bonding and bridging orientations. So we define community social capital as the common values and the resources of social networks in various forms that establish a sense of community and belonging. And with that definition basis, we took 3 dimensions here, and those dimensions are measured by the measurement items. So the first, promoting a sense of community, and second, bringing together different people from different backgrounds, and third, providing a place for people to feel of sense of belonging. And these three items are the set of measurement items to measure social capital, to measure the nonprofit role in building social capital creation, in building social capital. And for shared mission, we use 4 items developed by McDonald in 2007. And for organizational learning, we use 11 items developed from the management literature, taking the 4 subdimensions: knowledge acquisition, knowledge distribution, knowledge interpretation, and organizational memory. And I will show you how we have structured the factor for our measurement. And organizational innovation, we use 5 items adapted from the OECD's innovation survey questionnaire in order to capture the product, process, and marketing innovations. Okay. So here you can see that full list of those measurement items for shared mission, learning, innovation, and control variables as well. So we've got all the high enough reliability estimates for all these sub-study variables in terms of their composed scale. And in addition to that, you can also see these composed scale correlations, basically putting all the different, putting all the measurement items into the common composed scale. And the correlations are high enough among these study variables. Here, 1, 2, 3, 4, social capital creation, innovation, learning, and shared mission. One thing to be noted here is basically that there's a pretty much inflated mean statistic for shared mission. In a 7-point like scale, we've got the mean value of higher than 6 in shared mission, but we still think that it is worth trying to test and get the analysis done. And all the other variables are control variables for employment size, for asset size, and for arts sector, educational sector, health sector, and human services sector. All right. So for organizational learning, so we've got a lot of measurement items, as many as 11 items, right? And that represents the 4 subdimensions, and each of these 4 subdimensions actually include multiple measurement items. So we needed to do the second order factor analysis in order to test whether that theoretical structure of these 4 learning processes are really combined into a common 1-factor structure. So we've done this second order CFA for organizational learning, and as you can see here, we've got the best amount of the statistics and pretty much high enough standard loadings at the first stage, and as well as second order standard loadings as well. So we use this structure as the factor structure for organizational learning in further joint CFAs and model test. Right. So here's this joint second order CFA for study constructs, because we are not just taking those measurement items as part of the composite scale, but we wanted to make sure that each of these measurement items are partially contributing to the common construct, which is a factor, and then we use those factors as they are into our SEM analysis to see their covariance structures. So organizational learning, as you can see here, was structured as the second order factor structure, and all others are the single order ones. And from these joint CFA, what we can also check is their convergent and discriminant validity, which is combined to ensure construct validity of all these study constructs to be tested in a single structural regression modeling analysis. So when you see the average variance extracted values, these values are pretty much high enough, all higher than 0.4, which means that they do have at least certain level of convergent validity. Every study construct here And standard loadings are high enough, all higher than 0.5, right? And for the discriminability that each one of these study constructs are discriminant enough among each other, we can compare the values of squared AV values and their interfactor correlations. And the squared AV values, none of them were basically the lower than their interfactor correlations, corresponding interfactor correlations. So we also here ensure discriminability that's shaped. And then we do this sim analysis. So we employ the first stage moderating mediation process analysis and conducting a sim analysis by putting these equations. So M refers to the mediator, which is innovation, and X refers to learning, and W refers to the moderator, which is shared mission, and XW it refers to the interaction term here, and Y is for social capital creation. So here is the analytical diagram that we have tested on. And the score boxes, and each one of them refers to the each single measurement items, and the circle ones are the symbols for constructs, factor structures. So then the model test, we've got these findings. So we used general random as type with maximum likelihood estimators. And with that, we've set shared emissions variance as 1. And then we've got these parameter estimates. So all these direct interaction effects, mediation effects, and moderating mediation effects, they do support all the hypotheses that we've set. Support direct effects, innovation on social capital creation, learning on social capital creation, learning on innovation. And we don't have a significant direct effect of shared emission and innovation. Rather, we have only the interaction effect is significant here, right? And for the mediation effect, significant. And for the moderating mediation effects, is we put the shared emissions mean values, and then get the one standard deviation above and one standard deviation below, and then see how that mediation effect has changed. And as you can see here, there is a definitely strengthening effect of shared emission. So when you have a high scale of shared emission, then you have a stronger mediation effect of learning, innovation, and social capital creation. But then you have a lower level of shared emission, then you have a lower mediation effect for the same relationship. Okay? So all these, so these are the findings simplified for the hypothesized effects only. So all these, errors and their estimates confirm that the 4 hypotheses are valid. And then here we can see that graph for the moderating effect of shared emission. The orange and the blue ones, these 2 lines are, the slopes are the different different effects of learning on innovation in terms of the different levels of shared emission. So for high in shared emission, you have a sharp slope of that effect. But then for a low level of shared emission, then you have pretty much a flatter slope here, right? So with that findings, we suggest some implications made from this research. So we found that the combination of nonprofit learning and innovation, when guided well by the shared mission, they help the nonprofit promote their community social capital creation role. And this set of findings in fact address the inquiry on how nonprofits combine their entrepreneurial and expressive orientations terms of promoting their community serving competencies. So not just adopting new entrepreneurial models and methods that can also work, but you also need to make sure to clarify how these practices can serve both the instrument and expressive accountability in terms of the community building context of nonprofits. And our solution to that is mission fulfillment to be shared around the common value creating motivation in the nonprofit for each organization. And this is certainly not the only solution that we definitely know. So we call for more frameworks to unite the separate nonprofit accountabilities to be connected to their role in building further community social capital. So that's about it. And if you have any questions, you can definitely feel free to email any one of us. So here are our faces, co-authors. And yeah, that's about it.
Great, thanks very much, Sungdae. Interesting presentation. So we'll take some questions from the audience. Feel free to post in the chat if you would like, and I'll be happily read out the question on your behalf. Or you can simply, raise your hand within Zoom. But in fact, we've got a fairly small audience, so feel free even just to unmute yourself and ask your question. So perhaps I'll start, Sungdae, with the first one. I think I've just general reflection on doing this kind of research, or what were the challenges and pitfalls of working with a concept like social capital?
Well, social capital is basically, I guess the biggest challenge was there were too many similar scholars and insightful scholars already putting themselves committed into the area, and then the journey to get our own theoretical and conceptual framework for what social capital is and how it's different from, different between different levels of social capital was, I guess, the biggest challenge. But once we got our own journey to that conceptualization, especially for community social capital, with that three, specific dimensions, and then after that, there was a really huge sort of the range of opportunities to explore. And since I understand recent studies have done a lot of empirical studies, and it was really awesome. But still, I guess we've done a lot of theoretical works. But in contrast, I don't think the empirical works and empirical findings and analysis are really following enough to that theoretical refinement that we have established, I guess. So that narrowing that gap between the rich context of the theoretical foundations and the recent sort of emergence of empirical findings is probably, I guess, the biggest challenge that we face, and that we probably move forward and to fill the gap or something. So
Yeah, and it certainly is a challenge, because some approaches to social capital might say that shared mission is part of social capital. And so how do we try and make sense of these very different kind of theoretical or conceptual approaches that understand social capital to be different things, and then your research feeding in shared mission as influencing the nature of organizational innovation, then being a driver of community social capital. That's a different kind of approach than some of the literature. Of course, there's so many different approaches in the literature. So I think it's challenging then to try and make sense of it all when there's so many different ways of understanding the concept.
right. So one of the sort of motivations that I actually put myself committed to that specific community social capital context was basically that when I was reading a lot of management literature and studies, they also do study social capital, but at the organizational level. And because I understand there are definitely valid so many theoretical approaches to social capital, and in every one of them is definitely valid, and I don't want to criticize or condemn them, but one of the social capital approaches in the management literature was basically about just really narrowly focused on organizations and how organizations within the organization take some kind of resources among different members, and I really though it was very much narrowly sort of focused because they are from the management literature. So I think it is really important to make sure that the nonprofit management scholars also need to put into the area and provide some kind of broader context, especially nonprofits' role is really huge and critical in terms of community building. And I think I think a social capital it works, I guess, best when it is strongly connected to the community context. So and it's not just about local communities like categorized by the government. Like you have cities, you have counties, then you have states or something. But within even in one single city, you have so many different communities sharing the same identities of that community. And then within the community, you really have shared norms and values. And those things are not equally, not just freely given to all the same. So it's just different, and by the different resources and by the different community reservoirs of that they have, they do have a different sort of trajectories of development of that community. So that really, it's not just about intangible trust, not just about intangible sort of being comfortable in the community or something, but it also now results in tangible and materialized outcomes and social development, benefits. But sadly, it's actually so much differentially provided to different communities, and that can be also a source of discrimination and social inequity. So the nonprofit sector definitely needs to jump in and addresses that problem, because individuals, they don't have that much sort of capacity to do that. So nonprofits as a group of community members having some sort of capacities and managerial competencies, they do need to jump in and make sure to build and promote their communities' social capital to be evenly and equally distributed, so that individual members can benefit from and enjoy them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you made a really good point about the nature of the organizational literature as well, because the way in which a nonprofit functions is obviously different than the way in which for-profit organizations function. And if you think about what social capital does, it's a form of capital. It's a stock. It's an ability that influences the nature of what individuals do. Basically individual action. And so, a lot of the literature talks about the outcomes being, information sharing, collaboration, cooperation, collective action, these kinds of actions of individuals. And when you think about the way in which nonprofits work, the motivations of individuals do tend to be a bit different than for profits. Often there's a lot of volunteer people working within nonprofits, and so the reasons people have for acting within the organization and pursuing the goals of the organization are different. And of course, that's then why understanding social capital is so critically important to understanding what people are doing within the organization and why that's important. So I think it's really great you're focusing on that, because the organizational literature on social capital tends to focus on that different dynamic, and that clearly the dynamic within nonprofits is a bit different.
Right.
So a question did come up in the chat, just to me personally, someone asking about why you think the response rate was about 10%. I think it was 11%, if I get the number exactly right.
Right. Yeah, well, there are probably several regions where we've got the low response rate. I guess the biggest reason is basically that was administered online. So I have done this through Qualtrics, which is actually the most convenient way, and actually doesn't cost a lot because you have your labor, then you can do that manually or something. But the thing is, so when you get that such survey invitation and a request as a CEO of a whole organization, that you wouldn't probably easily you know ignore, or you don't really take that much seriously or something, even if they really do uh, you know value what they do as part of the entire nonprofit context. But when you are the CEO or executive director of the organization, then I mean, because Yeah, that's so I've done 5 reminders, which was actually weekly reminders, and that was yeah. And at some point, then I just realized that I don't think it is. I don't think sending further reminders would be effective enough or something. So probably it's time to stop and just getting that response is encoded and do the work with that response rate. But still, as I said, I've done a lot of mean difference tests between because I have got the population data. So I've done the mean difference tests in terms of the major organizational characteristics, and there was no significant mean differences. Although the estimates of the subject organizations is consistently lower than the population estimates. And as I said, I assume that it is attributed to the different compositions of the different sectors. So you have in legal categorization, you have hospitals, uh, very rich hospitals, and you have very rich education institutions in the nonprofit categorization. But when you ask them, when you ask Harvard University's president, are you a nonprofit? Then well, broadly, yeah, we're a nonprofit, but more likely we are a educational institution itself, right? And then when you ask the CEO of a large hospital, although it is legally categorized in the nonprofit sector, when you ask the same question, then they probably will not even answer the question. I'm so busy. I don't have much time to talk with you or something about that, right? So then I think we've effectively kind of make some kind of adjustment about the different proportions, and because of that different sort of mean statistics things that we've got consistently lower estimates in the subject organizations, but significance from the statistical point of view, then it was indicating that the sample was representative enough of the population. So we don't have much concern about that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think response rates are always interesting because our expectations as researchers is that everyone should want to respond to this and we should get 100% response rate. But of course, the reality is never that. And some people would think that a 2% response rate is great. Other people would think that a 20% response rate is great. To me, something like 11%. I don't think that's surprising. And like you said, you did that statistical analysis to see that it is representative of the population. So I mean, I think it's everyone's busy. So getting people to respond to a survey can be difficult.
Thank you.
So any other questions people have? Feel free to just unmute yourself if you'd like to ask yourself, or you can post in the chat if you have a question. While people are thinking, Sungdae, I was perhaps reflecting on where next. What are the outstanding questions, and what other research in this space would you like to do?
Well, I'm a nonprofit management scholar, so I would like to definitely sort of push for the exploration of how nonprofits really sort of specifically contribute to the creation of social capital. It's not just about uh, internal managerial features of nonprofits and how you can internally develop your competencies to get that role be promoted, and moving forward and going for that role for community social capital. But what would be the sort of external dimensionalities that you can really kind of tag effectively, like how you interact with the community members and how you really understand the community context for each nonprofit and how they understand their local context, how they do cooperate and work with other local-based nonprofits or other, organizations that also work and promote and do the same things and do the same roles or something. So that's probably focusing on the external dimensions of nonprofits and their performance would have been another, I guess, approach to really do that. And the other thing I have been thinking about in terms of social capital is basically how we can really sort of effectively transform the intangible concepts and intangible resources of a social capital into more materialized and more substantive opportunities and resources to be really utilized, to be really benefited, and to be really sort of shared so that community members in each community, they really can see them, they really can observe how they benefit from it, how they really enjoy it. So they also get to the point of realizing that our community's social capital is really important, and getting that shared norms, trust, and having the shared value orientation, and then within that social networks, sort of producing consistent positive externalities from the social networks is really it really helps my life as individuals and as community members. I think that sort of links will also be another, I guess, approach to explore, especially in how nonprofits contribute to that and how nonprofits make the connections between individuals and the community context.
Yeah, and certainly, social capital seems to be one of those things when people are more aware of the benefits and importance of sociability, of relationships, of working together, then they're able to be more purposeful and deliberate about how they actually invest in the development of social capital, and it changes the nature of their actions, which then has a range of different positive impacts. And perhaps one way to think about this is that social capital could be seen as perhaps both an input and an output of the operation of a nonprofit. That it's an input in the way that it is beneficial for a nonprofit to achieve its mission, to actually carry out its operations. So it's an input in that respect, but it's also an output because the way in which the nonprofit carries out its activities can also create social capital just purely through the engagement with the community or the engagement of actors within the organization itself. And so that very kind of complex and dynamic role of both input and output simultaneously, I think, is a really fascinating dimension to social capital. And the more we can understand that, the more we can both be able to improve the effectiveness of nonprofits in terms of the way in which they carry out their mission, but also how nonprofits can influence and impact the creation of social capital, I guess, which is probably more your focus on the research, but it's a really fascinating area of research.
Recent nonprofit management studies actually focus on that part. So I think it's a paper published in 2020 by Beth Gaisley that she found that the community social capital bases actually have resulted in um, different levels of access to local parks. So in the United States, you not only rely on the government or local government agencies to enjoy their parks and community facilities, but it is also there's a huge portion of that sort of assets are they come from the charitable associations and their charitable activities, and those charitable activities basically the result of the community sort of social capital. And then these things really have led to the social inequitable levels of access to local parks for different communities. And in the United States, you not only
So I just lost Sungdae for a minute. See if he comes back. Here we go. I think we just lost your connection for a second there.
right. So yeah, for such inequitable access and in local area, lifestyles would also be very much strongly related to community social capital, and that has been sort of mostly studied recently in the nonprofit management literature. So I'm really looking forward to just keeping you know engaged in that work and efforts, and to further explore that dynamics. And so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, great. So we still do have a few more minutes left if anyone does have any questions. This is kind of probably your last opportunity to get a question in if you have one. And maybe not just questions, if you have a comment or anything you'd like to add to what we're talking about, particularly nonprofit management and the role of social capital, feel free to to either unmute yourself or rapidly type something in the chat, because if there aren't any other further questions, then we'll look to wrap up very soon. So any final thoughts, Sungdae, since we'll give participants another minute to think of any other questions they have, and any final thoughts you'd like to share about your work?
I wanted to ask you a question as well. So how, I mean, because I'm very much interested in joining, this international social capital association, definitely. And how does this sort of scholarly community approach, what social capital is and how they really sort of, address. So what is the main sort of I don't know, issue that can be addressed by promoting social capital, and how valuable. So how do you see the value of social capital from the international context? Because we're all from all different countries, and I can't easily capture how that single concept can be shared throughout the world in the global context, like in Australia, I don't know, some other Asian countries, African countries, and Europe countries, we share that concept from the really kind of common basis of meanings, of its roles, the common sort of issues to solve through promoting social capital or something. So so how does that association sort of approach that?
You've asked me a question about my favorite topic. So, so perhaps there's a couple of things to talk about there. I think the first one is that the meaning of social capital across different cultures, and how can you translate that concept into different contexts. And I think fundamentally we're talking about the same thing. If we really get to the heart of it, we're talking about the benefits and importance of sociability, how the way in which we're connected and the way in which we see each other and the way in which we form communities impacts the nature of our actions, and that has a whole range of different benefits. And so the exact context or details, nature of culture, the nature of norms, trust, governance structures, laws, so many things are obviously going to influence the nature of that, and they're going to be different in every different context. But the fundamental idea is kind of the same across any area, any culture, any country, any context. Just need to understand the richness of the context. So I think there's that. And then the other part of it is, well, how can we as scholars, how can we progress this across an international community? And I think the reason why we created the association is because social capital scholars tend to be a little bit isolated. They may have one or two colleagues, but the rest of their department or the rest of their faculty perhaps aren't particularly interested in the concept. They're doing other work. And so we need to connect people. We need to connect scholars and give them the opportunity, and we need to, as scholars, we need to engage in much more of these kinds of discussions where we can challenge different ideas and different conceptualizations and question, and by that process we can improve the work that we're doing. And that's the hope, is that this association will provide that kind of opportunity. We're going to hold a conference in February of 2026 in Dubai. And this is all critical to getting people together and getting people having those kind of conversations, because the critical literature on social capital is reasonably vast, and clearly the concept has some challenges. And I think the vast majority of those challenges come from the fact that we are a little bit disconnected, and we don't talk with each other enough, and we don't challenge each other's ideas enough. And so the more of that we can do, the better, I think.
Are you trying to, or are you planning to sort of establish a new journal for that specific topic, or do you have already have a journal outlet for that topic?
Potentially. I mean, I think one of the challenges with social capital, of course, is that all it is a conceptual framework, and it can be applied to basically anything. And so what we see at the moment, of course, is that social capital as a conceptual framework is being applied in public health and environmental management and non-profit management, and obviously hundreds and hundreds of other kind of research areas. And that's kind of probably where the publications belong, is within their subject or their interest area. So I think, the idea of having a social capital specific publication, I think it's a good idea, and perhaps we could do that. But given the diversity of different interest areas, maybe that it isn't as useful as actually just continuing to publish in the interest area journals as we are now.
Thank you so much.
So I haven't seen any other questions pop up. A couple of comments in the chat, just thanking you for your presentation. And certainly, I enjoyed it. I'm sure everyone who watched on YouTube enjoyed it. And yeah, we really appreciate you taking the time to put this together for us.
My pleasure and honor.
All right, so let's wrap up there. Look forward to the next one. And anyone who's interested, check out the information on the International Social Capital Association.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sungdae.
Hope to see you again too.